a flat, dry slap against the linoleum, the kind of sound that cuts through the clatter of dishes and the low drone of the lunch crowd and lands in your chest before your eyes have finished turning toward it. She was at table 7, refilling iced tea for a couple from out of town, when she looked up and saw Derek Voss standing in the middle of the floor with his arms crossed and his jaw set the way it always got when he wanted everyone in the room to understand that he was the kind of man who could afford to be cruel in public and had decided today was a good day for it. The document lay face up on the linoleum. She could read the header from 6 feet away. Notice of legal proceeding. Property dispute. Harlow Estate. She set the picture down carefully on the edge of table 7. The couple looked at the paper on the floor. They looked at Derek. They looked at Cassie. She gave them a small, practiced smile, the kind she had been giving customers for 3 years, the kind that said, "Everything is fine in here," even when it absolutely was not, and she walked across the floor and picked the document up. The diner was called the Blue Sparrow, and it sat on the corner of Market and 5th in Redding, California, squeezed between a laundromat and a tire shop, the kind of place that smelled permanently of bacon grease and dish soap, and the particular exhaustion of people who worked hard for not enough money and came back the next day and worked hard again. Cassie had started there at 21, 3 weeks after she buried her father, because the hospital bills had not stopped arriving, just because Ray Harlow had, and the trailer on Stone Ridge Road was not going to pay for itself, and she had always been better at working than at grieving. She was 24 now. She had been at the Blue Sparrow every Tuesday through Sunday for 3 years running. She knew every crack in the counter, every sticky hinge on the storage room door, every name of every regular, and the exact order they would place before they sat down. She was good at her job. She was good at most things she put her hands to, if she was being honest with herself, which she generally was not, because honesty about your own capabilities had a way of leading to grief about everything you were not using them for, and she had already had enough grief to last her a while. Derek owned the Blue Sparrow. He had owned it for 9 years, and in that time he had let the booths go threadbare, and the ceiling tiles go yellow, and the parking lot go to gravel and ruts. But he had always kept the staff lean and the margins clean, and himself behind the register, where he could watch everything and everyone with that particular patience of a man who understood that most people would eventually give him what he wanted if he just waited long enough. He was 34 years old, thick through the chest and neck, with close-cropped dark hair, and the kind of smile that only appeared when he was about to take something from someone. Cassie stood in the middle of the floor and read the first paragraph of the document without moving to a different location, without pretending she needed to find a private corner for this. If Derek wanted to do it in public, she would read it in public. The language was dense and formal, but the meaning was not complicated. A clause in her father's original will had been rendered legally insufficient due to the death of the designated witness, a man named George Pratt, who had passed 8 months after Ray Harlow himself. Under California probate code, the absence of a living witness to a handwritten codicil created grounds for contest. Brandon Voss, attorney at law, was petitioning the probate court to have the property transfer voided. The 2.3 acres on Stone Ridge Road, the small parcel her father had bought in 1999 and paid off over 12 years of careful monthly payments and lived on in a double-wide trailer until a drunk driver took him on Route 44 on a Tuesday night in October 3 years ago, would revert to contested status pending resolution. She had 30 days to respond with legal representation, or the default judgment would proceed in the petitioner's favor. 30 days. She made $11 an hour plus tips. Derek watched her read it. He was leaning against the counter with his coffee mug in his hand, and when she finally looked up at him, he had that smile on small and anticipatory, the smile of a man who had already worked out how this was going to end. "Your daddy left you a piece of dirt and a box of junk," Derek said. His voice was calm and conversational, the register he used when he had thought something through in advance and wanted everyone nearby to hear the conclusion. "Sign it over and move on. Brandon can have the paperwork ready by Friday. You walk away, you keep your job, everybody goes home happy." Cassie looked at him for a long moment. She folded the document along its original crease. She tucked it into the front pocket of her apron between her order pad and her 2 pens, and she felt the particular solidity of it there, the paper weight of something she was going to have to carry for a while. "I have tables," she said. She went back to table 7. The out-of-town couple left her $4 on a $12 check. She pocketed it without counting it and went to bust the table by the window, and the entire time she did not let herself think about what was in her apron pocket or what the next 30 days were going to look like. She had learned this from long practice. You did not let the weight of a thing settle on you all at once, or it would put you on the floor. You took small pieces of it, and you carried them one at a time, and you kept moving forward, and eventually you either found a way through or you ran out of floor, and until one of those things happened, you kept moving. She kept moving until her shift ended at 3. The drive home on Stone Ridge Road took 11 minutes from the diner's parking lot. The road was 2 lanes of old county asphalt running north through scrub oak and dry grass, and the occasional cluster of mailboxes that marked the turnoffs to properties set back from the road. The trailer sat at the end of a gravel drive behind a row of overgrown rosemary bushes that her mother had planted in another lifetime, and that Cassie had never found the heart to cut back. It was not much. It was hers. She sat in her car in the driveway for a while without getting out. The engine ticked as it cooled. A scrub jay landed on the rosemary and looked at her with one eye and flew away. Inside the trailer was clean and small and organized the way things get when you do not have much space and you have learned to be careful with everything you own. She had painted the kitchen walls herself, a pale yellow that looked different depending on the time of day, warmer in the morning when the east light came through the small window above the sink, flatter in the afternoon when the sun moved around to the other side. There was a bookshelf in the living room made from 2 sawhorses and a plank of sanded wood filled with paperbacks she had bought at yard sales, their spines cracked and faded. On the counter, a coffee maker, a cast-iron skillet, a ceramic bowl that currently held 3 apples and a tangerine, and in the corner of the living room under the window that faced the creek, a cardboard box. She had not touched it in 3 years. She had moved it twice. Once when she first came back to the trailer after the funeral to gather some things before the impound fees on her father's truck ate the last of what she had in her checking account, and once when she painted the living room and had to shift the furniture around to reach the baseboards. Both times she had moved it with the particular careful avoidance of someone who knows they are not ready for what is inside, and knows that not being ready is a choice they are making consciously and does not judge themselves too harshly for it. Both times she had set it back down in the corner under the window and not opened it and made herself coffee instead. Ray Harlow had not left much: the trailer and the land it sat on, a 2004 Ford pickup that was totaled in the accident, a checking account with $340 in it, a drawer full of tools that she still used, a coffee can of bolts and screws sorted by size, which had been the thing that undid her most completely when she found it, because it was such a specific and ordinary act of care, the thing a person does when they believe they have more time ahead of them, when they believe someone else will eventually need these bolts, and they might as well be organized for whoever that turns out to be. She had stood in the kitchen holding that can for a long time. And the box. She knew what was in the box because Lena had told her briefly at the kitchen table 2 days after the funeral in the particular way Lena told things that were important, which was directly and without a lot of ornamentation. Her aunt, her father's older sister, had driven up from Sacramento and helped her go through the trailer and had set the box aside and said that one you keep, and that had been the end of the conversation, and Cassie had not pushed it because she was 21 and exhausted and not ready. She sat down on the couch across from the box. She looked at it the way you look at something you know is going to cost you something emotionally, and you are trying to decide whether you have enough left right now to pay it. Then she got up and poured herself a glass of water and came back and sat down and drank it slowly, and when the glass was empty, she set it on the coffee table, and she got up again and carried the box to the couch and opened the cardboard flaps. The smell reached her before she could see anything. Leather and oil and something older underneath. Both of those the particular compound smell of a thing that has been lived in for a long time, that has absorbed years of weather and road, and the specific warmth of a human body that no longer existed. She sat very still with that smell around her and let herself feel it fully for exactly as long as she could stand, to which was not long, and then she looked inside. The vest was folded on top. She had seen it on him her whole life. When she was small, it had meant he was going somewhere without her, which she had always resented slightly, in the automatic way children resent things they cannot fully understand and therefore cannot accept. Later, when she was old enough to understand that the vest meant something larger and more complicated than she wanted to think about, she had dealt with that understanding by simply declining to think about it, the way teenagers decline to think about the things that make their parents different from other parents, the things that feel too large and too specific to be incorporated into the ordinary life you are trying to build. And then later, still after she had left for community college and come back and left again and come back again and settled into the particular rhythm of Reading and the Blue Sparrow and the drive on Stone Ridge Road, she had simply stopped seeing the vest the way you stop seeing furniture. Just another fixture in the space, just another thing that was always there. She lifted it out of the box with both hands. It was heavier than she expected, which surprised her, even though it should not have. Old leather has weight that newer things do not, a density that comes from years of being saturated and dried and saturated again from all the seasons it has moved through. The color was dark walnut at the center and gone almost brown at the edges, where decades of sun had been slowly pulling the dye out. The patches were hand-sewn, the stitching dense and tight in the way that things are sewn when the person doing it understands that the work needs to last. Some of the patches had small, loose threads at their corners where the fabric beneath had worn thin over time, and these loose threads looked like the fraying ends of very long sentences. On the back, the winged death's head looked up at her from the leather, its eyes hollow and deliberate, and above it, the top rocker read, Hell's Angels in white letters on red backing, and below it, the bottom rocker read, California in the same clean lettering. On the front left chest above where her father's heart would have been a small rectangular patch in red and white. Angels forever, forever angels. Below it a patch she had seen before but never stopped to read. Sergeant at Arms. She turned the vest in her hands, feeling the specific weight and texture of each panel. On the inside of the left panel, in black permanent marker, in the handwriting, she knew as well as she knew her own 2 lines. For Cassie. If you ever need help, Cass, wear the vest. Just once. Someone will see it. She sat with that for a long time. Outside, the afternoon light moved from gold to flat white as the sun continued west. She could hear a truck somewhere on the main road downshifting for the curve, the engine braking sound carrying clean in the dry air. She set the vest aside and kept going through the box. Beneath where the vest had been, a manila envelope sealed with a strip of packing tape, its edges just beginning to lift. A photograph 4x6 developed from actual film, the colors slightly warm in the way film photographs from that era always are. A small leather case with a snap closure that held a folding pocket knife with a bone handle, well used, the blade edge still good. A folded piece of paper that turned out to be a receipt from a gun shop dated 2002 for a cleaning kit for a firearm she did not know her father had owned. A strip of 4 photo booth pictures showing a younger version of her father and a woman she recognized immediately as her mother, both of them in the middle of laughing at something outside the frame, her mother's hand half raised in a gesture that would never be completed now. She did not open the manila envelope. She held it in her hands for a moment, feeling its contents through the paper, and then she set it carefully to one side. She picked up the photograph. About 70 or 80 people in it, all of them in leather vests, standing and sitting and kneeling in loose rows in front of a building she did not recognize, bikes lined up in neat rows behind them. The light was flat and warm, late afternoon somewhere, and the people in the photograph were varied in every way except the vests, which were all the same unmistakable red and white on black. Her father was in the center of the front row. He was younger in the photograph, his hair still mostly dark, his beard trimmed close, and he had the particular posture of someone who is entirely comfortable in the space they are standing in, not performing ease but actually experiencing it the way you can tell the difference if you look. His right hand was resting on the shoulder of the man kneeling in front of him. The kneeling man was enormous, built like something that was designed primarily to bear weight, with a gray beard that reached his collar and forearms that suggested a life spent moving heavy things from one place to another. He was looking directly at the camera with small dark eyes that seemed almost amused. On his vest, positioned where the sergeant-at-arms patch would be on her father's, a patch that read, "Treasurer." Cassie studied the photograph for a long time. She set it back in the box and put the vest back on top, and closed the flaps and carried the box back to the corner under the window. She had not been ready 3 years ago. She was not sure she was ready now either, but the document in her apron pocket had made the question of readiness feel a little less relevant. She made herself dinner. She ate it standing at the counter looking at the box. She did not taste anything. She went to bed and lay in the dark, listening to the wind move through the rosemary bushes and thinking about what 30 days meant in practical terms and finding no comfortable answer. She did not sleep much that night. In the morning, she called a lawyer, not because she had any real expectation of affording one, but because she did not know what else to do, and inaction had always sat worse with her than doing something inadequate. The lawyer was a woman who had a small practice above a tax preparation service on downtown Reading, and she listened to Cassie for 15 minutes over the phone and then told her gently, but without any false softness, that the situation was legally complex and that her retainer was $2,000 and that without it, she could not take the case. Cassie thanked her and hung up. She called legal aid. Legal aid was backed up 6 to 8 weeks. She had 30 days. The woman on the phone was sympathetic and unhelpful. She went to her shift. Derek said nothing about the document that day. He watched her work with that flat, patient expression, the one that communicated that he was simply waiting for the arithmetic to work itself out in his favor, which it always did, eventually, for people like him in situations like this. He cut her section to 3 tables without explanation. She made $41 in tips over a 6-hour shift. She did not say anything about any of it. On her break, she sat in the parking lot in her car and looked at her phone and thought about calling Lena. Lena would listen carefully, and she would be genuinely sorry, and she would not have $2,000 either. Lena worked in the administration office of a school district in Sacramento and drove a 2012 Civic with a rear wiper that had stopped working in 2019 and had 2 kids in high school and a mortgage she was managing carefully. Cassie was not going to add herself to the list of things Lena was managing. She put her phone in the cup holder and went back inside. The pawn shop was called Gold and Silver Exchange, and it occupied a unit in a strip mall between a nail salon and a cell phone repair place, the kind of strip mall that has existed in some form in every mid-sized California city since 1985. Cassie had driven past it 100 times without ever having a reason to go in. She sat in the parking lot in her car for almost 20 minutes with the vest in a canvas bag on the passenger seat before she went through the door. Inside, it smelled like old electronics and carpet cleaner, and the specific neutrality of a space where people regularly come in with something they care about and leave without it. The display cases along the walls held the familiar archaeology of hard times and hard choices. Guitars, in cases that did not match watches, laid on velvet firearms, sorted by type A shelf of power tools that someone had needed to convert to rent money. Behind the counter, a young man, maybe 22 or 23, with an undercut and a silver ring through his left ear, and the particular flat professional expression of someone who has seen enough desperation in a single workday to last most people a month and has learned to keep his face very still about it. Cassie set the canvas bag on the counter and took the vest out and laid it flat on the glass. The kid picked it up by the bottom hem with 2 fingers pinching the leather. The way you handle something you are not entirely certain about turned it so he could see the back patch, looked at it for about 3 seconds and set it back down on the counter. "Old cut," he said. "Hell's Angels." He said it with the tone of someone presenting a preliminary objection. "You know there are going to be complications moving something like this. Club property, technically. Legal gray area." She was aware this was not entirely accurate, but she also did not have the energy or the legal knowledge to argue the specific details. "How much?" she said. He looked at it again without touching it this time. 20, he said. "Maybe 25. It's not really a market I can move." She stood there looking at the vest on the glass counter. She looked at the death's head on the back. She looked at the sergeant at arms patch on the front. She looked at the loose thread at the corner of the bottom rocker and thought about the number of miles her father had put on that thread before it started to come loose. $25. She was about to say yes because $25 was $25, and she genuinely could not identify a better option when the bell above the door sounded behind her and someone came in. She did not turn around immediately. She heard the door close. She heard footsteps on the linoleum, not hurried, deliberate. They stopped somewhere 3 or 4 feet behind her. She kept her eyes on the vest. "Fine," she began to say, and then she heard a sound. Not words, just a breath, the sharp, involuntary intake of someone who has just recognized something unexpected, the particular caught breath of recognition that you cannot control because it happens before your brain has caught up with your eyes. She turned. The man was large in the way that suggests decades of actual physical work rather than anything done in a gym, thick through the shoulders and neck, with forearms that looked like they belonged on something structural. He was maybe 60-61, wearing heavy denim jeans and work boots and a leather vest over a flannel shirt. The vest was old and heavily patched red and white on black leather, and on the left chest above, where his heart would be a patch that read, "Treasurer." He was not looking at her. He was looking at the vest on the counter. His face had gone very still in the specific way that faces go still when they are trying to contain something. Then he looked at her, and she watched his eyes move between her face and the vest and back to her face, and something in them was doing a calculation. "Are you?" he started, and then he stopped, as if he needed to reconfigure the question. "What's your name?" "Cassie Harlow," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is your father Ray Harlow?" She registered the present tense and felt it land the way present tense about the dead always lands when someone does not yet know. Was she said? The single word sat between them. The man put his right hand on the counter beside the vest, not touching it, just placing his hand down near it, and he looked at it for a long moment. When he looked back at her, his expression was composed but not entirely, and he was not pretending otherwise. "Don't sell this," he said. His voice was low and steady and very certain. "I don't have a lot of choices right now," she said. "You have more than you know," he said. "Put it in your bag. Come outside. I'll buy you coffee, and I'll explain who I am." She looked at him for a moment. She looked at the kid behind the counter who had stepped back slightly and was looking at the large man with an expression that had shed its professional blankness entirely. She picked up the vest and put it back in the canvas bag. His name was Dutch McCabe. He had a dark blue Road King Classic parked 2 spots down from her car, and he sat across from her in the diner next door with his coffee and told her who her father was. Not the version she knew. Not the man who made pancakes on Saturday mornings with the radio on low and always remembered to check the oil in her car before she drove anywhere long and was reliably, consistently on time for every single thing that mattered, never late, not once, not for a recital or a graduation or a parent-teacher conference or a hospital appointment. Not the version she had actually lived alongside for 21 years. The other version. Ray Anthony Harlow had been patched into the Sacramento chapter in 1994, Dutch said. He had been sergeant at arms for 11 of the 22 years he was a full member. That role meant something specific in the structure of the club. It meant he was the person responsible for the physical security of the charter and its members. It meant he was the person you called when a problem had moved past the point where conversation was sufficient. It meant he had spent more than a decade being simultaneously the most capable and the most trustworthy person in rooms that required both qualities in the same person, and he had done it with a particular combination of physical capability and moral clarity that Dutch described as rare enough to be worth naming specifically. In 2009, Dutch said there was a trailer park on the south edge of Sacramento, 40 units small and old, where the residents had been there for decades and were being pushed out by a property management company, with connections to a city council member being removed on technical lease violations, mostly elderly people who had nowhere to go and no resources to fight it. Ray spent 3 months and a significant portion of his personal savings working through a legal mechanism that Dutch explained carefully, and that Cassie followed in its general shape, if not its precise details, and at the end of it, 11 families were still in their homes. None of them ever knew his name. He had not told them, and he had not told anyone else who did not need to know. In 2018, Dutch said there was a chemical processing facility outside of Redding, 17 miles from where they were sitting right now, that had been venting improperly treated runoff into a tributary that fed into the Keswick Reservoir. Ray had noticed something wrong with the creek that ran behind his property on Stone Ridge Road, and he had gotten a water quality testing kit from the county extension office and taken samples on 3 separate occasions over 6 weeks, and taken those samples to a state environmental attorney and agreed to be the named civilian witness in the resulting federal enforcement action. The case had eventually cost the company a $14 million fine and its operating license. He testified on camera, Dutch said. Full name on the record. Didn't ask for money. Didn't want his name in the paper. Just did the thing that needed doing. Cassie sat with her coffee cooling in front of her and looked at the table. She thought about the way her father had always known when the creek behind the property was running right or wrong. The way he checked it in the mornings, sometimes standing at the fence in his work boots with his coffee looking at the water with that particular focused attention she had never asked about because it had always been just another part of the way he moved through a morning. Just something Ray did. He never told me any of this, she said. Dutch turned his mug slowly in a circle on the table. That was intentional, he said. Ray had a specific theory about what a child needed and what a child should not have to carry. He thought the weight of a thing should belong to the person who chose to pick it up, not the people standing nearby. He didn't want you inheriting his complications before you were ready for them. She looked down at the canvas bag beside her on the seat. He left me the vest, she said. Dutch was quiet for a moment. He left you the vest because he knew there would come a time when you would need what it represents, he said. Not the history of it, not the reputation or what people think when they see it. Just the signal. He trusted that the right people would see it. She thought about the words on the inside of the left panel. Someone will see it. She thought about the timing of Dutch walking into a pawn shop at the exact right moment on a Tuesday afternoon. "How did you know I was there?" she said. Dutch lifted his coffee mug. "Small town," he said. "People notice things." She let that sit without pressing it. Then she took the document out of her apron pocket and unfolded it on the table and told him everything. About Brandon Voss and the voided witness clause and the 30-day deadline. About the $2,000 retainer and the 6 to 8 week backlog at legal aid. About Derek cutting her section and watching her from behind the register with that flat, patient expression. She told it plainly, without inflection or self-pity, the way she had learned to tell hard things, because inflection cost energy she did not currently have available. Dutch listened without interrupting or making any sound of sympathy. When she finished, he set his mug down and looked at the document for a moment without picking it up. "The land," he said carefully. "Tell me exactly where it sits." "The parcel," she told him. "Stone Ridge Road, 2.3 acres running from the road back to the creek." She gave him the parcel number from the document. Dutch's expression changed in a way she could not immediately read something moving behind his eyes that was partly recognition and partly something else. "The Northern Expansion Routing Study," he said quietly. "They released the preliminary report last spring." She did not understand the reference. He looked at her steadily. "Caltrans has been studying the northbound I-5 expansion corridor for 3 years," he said. "The preliminary routing came out in April. Parcels in the buffer zone along the proposed alignment, and your land on Stone Ridge with creek frontage in that zone." He paused and let her see where he was going with it. "Cassie, that land is worth somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 at current market. Conservative estimate. Could be higher depending on how the final routing resolves." She sat very still. "Brandon Voss is a real estate and probate attorney," Dutch said. "The preliminary routing study was filed as a public record the moment it was released. He would have had access to it the same day anyone else did." She thought about Derek leaning against the counter with his coffee mug. "Your daddy left you a piece of dirt and a box of junk." He knew, she said. They both knew, Dutch said, before they ever filed a single piece of paper. She looked out the window at the parking lot. Her car needed an oil change she had been putting off for 6 weeks because of the $30 cost. She had $47 in her checking account until Friday. "What do I do?" she said. Dutch picked up his coffee. First he said, "You don't sign anything. Not one page, not one line. Nothing. If Derek brings it up at work, you tell him your lawyer is handling it, and you walk away from the conversation." "I don't have a lawyer," she said. "You do now," he said. "Pro bono. A brother in San Jose who handles exactly this kind of case and who has been looking for a legitimate reason to go after Brandon Voss specifically for about 4 years. He paused. "Your father did a lot of favors over 22 years. Most of them are still outstanding." She looked at this man she had met 45 minutes ago and thought about what it meant to trust someone quickly and whether she had any choice about it. She decided she did not have a lot of choice about it. "What else?" she said. He said, "And then you let me make a call tonight." She drove home on Stone Ridge Road in the late afternoon with the vest in the canvas bag on the passenger seat and the window down the dry October air moving through the car, and she thought about a man who had stood at the fence every morning checking the creek and sorted his bolts by size and drove 11 hours round trip to file a document and never once mentioned any of it over Saturday morning pancakes. She thought about what it cost to be that kind of person in private, to move through the world doing things that nobody records, and nobody thanks you for making small corrections to the way things are that add up over time, leaving a world that is incrementally better than you found it without leaving your name on any of it. She pulled into the gravel drive and sat for a moment. Then she went inside and opened the manila envelope. Inside, 2 documents. The first was a copy of the original will she already knew about the one with the contested witness clause. The second was something she had never seen, had not known existed, had not thought to look for. It was a single page, typed and cleanly formatted with the embossed seal of a notary public at the bottom. A Las Vegas address, dated 14 months before Ray Harlow died. Codicil to the last will and testament of Ray Anthony Harlow. It was witnessed by two people, both of them with Nevada addresses, both of them presumably living. It was notarized. The language was unambiguous. It transferred the property at Stone Ridge Road to Cassie Marie Harlow unconditionally and permanently under the Uniform Disposition of Community Property Act, enforceable across state lines, and it named one Duncan Gerald McCabe with a Sacramento address as her legal advocate in the event of any dispute concerning the estate. Duncan Gerald McCabe, Dutch. She sat on the couch and held both documents and looked at the wall for a long time. He had known. He had prepared for this, for some version of this, for the Brandon Voss that was eventually going to appear for the technical objection and the 30-day deadline, and the document dropped on a diner floor. He had driven to Las Vegas 11 hours round trip with his kidneys failing, and he had arranged 2 witnesses and a notary, and he had filed this document and given it to Lena for safekeeping, with instructions that were apparently clear enough that Lena had kept them for 3 years without saying anything. And he had written a note on the inside of his vest. Wear the vest, just once. Someone will see it. She folded both documents carefully and put them back in the envelope and held it in her lap and thought about her father, the way you think about someone when you have just understood something new about them, when the picture you have been carrying of them for years has suddenly expanded in a direction you were not expecting. It was not a comfortable feeling. It was larger than comfortable, but it was not bad. She was not going to sign anything. She called Dutch from the kitchen table. He picked up on the first ring and listened without speaking while she described the codicil and the notary seal and the 2 Nevada witnesses. When she finished, there was a brief silence. He filed this 14 months before, Dutch said. I know, she said. That's when his kidneys started to give him real trouble, Dutch said. He wasn't supposed to ride that far. He paused. He drove 11 hours round trip to make sure this was right. She had already cried about this. She had done it after she hung up the phone, the first time sitting on the couch with the documents in her lap, and it had been thorough, and it had run its course, and it was finished. What do we do with it? She said. Dutch said the codicil superseded the contested clause entirely, if it was valid, which he believed it was. Brandon Voss's petition evaporated the moment the court saw it. They could file it immediately. But he said filing a document did not stop Derek from making her working life difficult in the meantime. Filing a document did not stop Brandon from finding another angle. Men who operated the way these 2 operated did not stop because you showed them a piece of paper. They stopped when the cost of not stopping became unacceptable to them. Visibility, Dutch said. These men are operating in the dark. Everything they've done depends on you not having support, not having anyone watching. He paused. What if you were no longer invisible? She thought about the photograph in the box. 70 or 80 people in leather vests in the afternoon light. Her father in the center of the front row, entirely at ease. How many people, she said. Dutch thought for a moment. 67, he said. Give or take. 3 charters within 2 hours of Reading. Enough to be clear without being excessive. No violence, he added before she could ask. Your father was very specific about that kind of thing, and so am I. Visibility only. These men operating in the dark need to have a light turned on. When she said, tomorrow morning, he said, 8 o'clock. Is Derek usually in by then? Between 7:30 and 8, she said. Coffee at the register by 8:15. Good, Dutch said. Go home. Sleep if you can. And Cassie, he said, wear the vest tomorrow. She looked at the vest draped over the kitchen chair. Then she hung up the phone and moved the vest from the chair to the hook by the door, where it would be the first thing she reached for in the morning. She called Lena after that. Her aunt picked up on the second ring from whatever remained of the school district workday. "Did you open the envelope?" Lena said before Cassie could say anything. "Yes," Cassie said. "I was wondering when Lena said, 'He told you to wait until I wore the vest. He said you'd know when you were ready. He said if you went to the vest you were ready.'" She paused and Cassie could hear the school district office going quiet around her the end of the day. "Did you know about Dutch McCabe?" "I knew Dutch before you were born," Lena said. "He and your father ran together for 15 years. Dutch was the one who found the notary in Las Vegas. He drove your father down there when Ray knew his health was going the wrong direction." She stopped. "Ray didn't want to tell you he was sick, Cassie. He didn't want you to spend whatever time he had left worrying about him instead of living your life." Cassie absorbed this. It landed in a complicated place. "He could have just told me," she said. Her aunt was quiet for a moment. "You know what he used to say about you know? He said Cassie takes care of everything she touches and she never asks for help, and that's the part that's going to cost her someday." Cassie did not say anything to this. "Well," Lena said. Someday came. She went in the next morning. She arrived at 7, tied on her apron, ran her opening side work the way she always did. Coffee brewed sugar caddies, filled salt and pepper, checked ketchup bottles, wiped, and restocked. The familiarity of the routine was its own kind of steadiness. She moved through it without hurrying. Derek came in at 7:30. He walked through the back, checked the prep, poured his coffee. He stood at the register and watched her take the first 2 tables of the morning rush without saying anything to her, which was its own kind of message. At 8:15 he came to the server station while she was entering an order. "You think about what I said," he said. "Easy and conversational, no edge yet. My lawyer is handling it," she said. She did not look up from the screen. A pause. "Your lawyer." "That's right." She could feel him standing there recalculating. She finished the order and picked up her tray. "You don't have a lawyer," he said. His voice had changed slightly, something harder moving underneath the evenness. She met his eyes then briefly and directly, the way her father had taught her to meet eyes when it mattered, without aggression, but without retreat either. Then she went to table 3. At 9:40, the door opened and a man came in she had not seen before. He was maybe 55, compact and businesslike, with wire-rimmed glasses and a pressed flannel shirt. He sat at the counter with a small briefcase and ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs and opened a notebook and sat writing in it while he ate. Nothing about him was unusual, except when he had come in, he had set his jacket on the stool beside him, and the jacket had a small pin on the lapel. A number. 81. She recognized it from the materials Dutch had sent her the night before, a brief overview in 3 paragraphs, just enough context. H was the 8th letter of the alphabet. A was the first. The pin was a support marker worn by people outside the club who understood what it meant. She refilled his coffee without being asked. He looked up at her and gave a small, single nod. On his break from the notebook while Derek was in the back on a phone call, the man left $12 on a $9 check and a note folded under the saucer. She picked it up when she cleared the counter. The codicil was filed this morning. 9:47 a.m. Shasta County Probate Court. Case number below. Brandon Voss's attorney of record will receive notification by end of business today. And below that, Dutch says to tell you your father was proud of you before any of this started. She stood at the counter and read it twice. She folded it and put it in her apron pocket next to her order pad. She did not cry. She had done that part already. She went to bus table 6. She did not hear directly from Derek for 2 days after the filing notification went out. She understood that this was because Brandon had called him. She could picture that conversation clearly enough. Brandon explaining that a Nevada codicil had appeared, that there were 2 living witnesses, that the probate judge was going to look at it, and most likely recognize it as superseding the original contested clause that the petition had become considerably more complicated than anticipated. On Thursday evening, Derek called her at home. "Where did you find it?" he said. No preamble, no greeting. Just the question, his voice stripped of its usual managed evenness. "Found what she said." "Don't," he said. "Don't do that." His voice was tight in a way she had not heard from him before. "I want to know who you've been talking to." "My lawyer," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "This isn't over. A codicil can be contested. Nevada notarization in a California estate creates jurisdictional questions. Lack of testamentary capacity at the time of signing." His tone was shifting towards something that was trying to sound like reason and was actually the sound of a man who had just found out his plan had a serious problem and was already building a new plan. "That's between our lawyers," she said. He was quiet again. Then his voice changed registers, moving toward the conciliatory smoothness he used when he wanted something. "Cassie, you've worked here 3 years. I've always been straight with you." She did not say anything to this. "I'm prepared to offer you a settlement," he said. $40,000, clean deed transfer, no further legal action from either side. You walk away with $40,000 cash, and this is all finished. She thought about what Dutch had told her. 300,000 minimum, perhaps 400. "I'll pass that to my lawyer," she said. The silence on the line went long enough that she could hear his breathing. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he said. She thought about a man who drove to Las Vegas with his kidneys, failing to file a document for a daughter he trusted to eventually be ready. "I think I do," she said. She ended the call. The following Tuesday morning began gray and cold, the sky low and uniform, the light flat and provisional. Cassie drove in on Stone Ridge and then Market with the vest on over her work uniform, the weight of it familiar now, after a week of wearing it on mornings before her shift, getting used to it, the way you get used to carrying something important. She parked in the lot behind the Blue Sparrow and got out and stood beside her car. She heard them before she saw them. Not loud at first, more a change in the quality of the air, a low vibration that she felt in her sternum before she consciously identified it as sound. It grew quickly into something that was unmistakably the sound of large displacement engines multiplied past any single source, rolling in from the west on Route 299 and turning south toward Market Street. The first bikes appeared at the intersection. They came in a column, 2 abreast, orderly and deliberate, moving at street speed without any urgency or drama. At the front, Dutch on the dark blue Road King. Behind him, they came in pairs, black leather and chrome and red and white patches, catching what thin October light there was, exhaust pipes barking low and rhythmic against the building fronts. She stood in the parking lot and watched them peel off to park along the shoulder of Market and in the spaces in front of the building and in the overflow lot across the street. She counted as they came. 40, 50, 61, 67. They parked in rows, engines shutting down in waves, the sound dropping to silence in sections, the way a tide goes out. The resulting quiet was its own kind of loud. 64 men and 3 women dismounted and stood beside their bikes. No one raised a voice. No one moved with any urgency. They stood the way people stand when they are completely at ease and completely serious at the same time, when those two things are not in conflict for them. Dutch walked across the lot toward her. He looked at the vest. He gave a small nod. "Ready," he said. She thought about the pawn shop. She thought about the document on the diner floor. She thought about a coffee can of bolts sorted by size. "Ready," she said. Inside the Blue Sparrow, Derek was already behind the register with his coffee. Dutch came in first. Cassie came in behind him. 3 men she had not met before came in behind her and positioned themselves near the door, not blocking it, simply occupying the space the way large and calm people occupy space, filling it with their weight and their stillness. The three customers at the breakfast counter looked up from their plates. Derek's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked at Dutch. He looked at Cassie. He looked at the vest on her shoulders, the death's head on the back of it facing him across the room. And then he looked through the window at the parking lot. The rows of bikes were fully visible from where he stood. The 67 riders, some walking slowly through the lot, some sitting on their machines, some standing in small groups in the morning cold, all of them in cuts, all of them entirely visible, entirely unhurried. Derek set his coffee mug down on the counter. Cassie walked to the center of the floor. She stood there in her blue sparrow apron and her father's vest, and she looked at Derek, and she spoke clearly. "I am not signing any documents," she said. "Not today, not Friday, not in 30 days. The codicil is real. Both witnesses are living and have provided sworn declarations, and the notarization is valid under the Uniform Disposition of Community Property Act, which is federal law and applies across state lines without restriction." She paused. "Your brother's cognitive capacity claim has no medical basis. My father's treating physician's name is on a release of records form that our attorney filed with the probate court this morning, alongside a letter from the physician stating that Ray Harlow was of full cognitive capacity at the time the codicil was executed." She had read those sentences 6 times on the phone with the attorney in San Jose the night before until she could say them without hesitation or stumble. She reached into her apron pocket and placed a folded document on the nearest table. "That is a copy of an email," she said. "Sent from Derek Voss to Arthur Gillespie, a member of the County Planning Commission, dated March 14th of this year, requesting early access to the Route 499 Northern Expansion Routing Study before its public filing date. It was sent to Gillespie's personal Gmail account rather than his county account. That means it exists outside the public records exemption. It constitutes procurement of non-public governmental data for the purpose of commercial real estate advantage. Under California Business and Professions Code 17,200, that is unlawful business practice. Under Penal Code 68, soliciting a public official is a felony." The 3 breakfast counter customers had gone entirely still. Derek's face had become a controlled blank, which was itself information. "You have no idea what you're holding," he said. His voice was quiet. "Our attorney does," she said. "He filed a copy with the California Department of Consumer Affairs this morning." She met Derek's eyes. "I am not asking you for anything except what was already mine. Drop the petition. Withdraw the contest filing, both of them today." She paused. "And I walk out of here and go about my morning." She did not say what happened if he did not. She did not need to. Through the window, the 67 riders were visible in the morning light, and one of them, a woman with cropped gray hair and a Fresno patch, was talking to a man with a press pass lanyard around his neck who Cassie happened to know covered real estate and municipal affairs for the Reading Record Searchlight and had been in the overflow lot across the street for the last 35 minutes. Dutch stood at the edge of the room and did not speak and did not need to. Derek looked at Dutch. He looked at Cassie. He looked at the document on the table. He looked out the window at the parking lot again, at the rows of bikes and the riders and the man with the press pass lanyard. She watched something happen in his face, the slow internal collapse of a configuration that has exceeded its design load. Not dramatic, just the quiet failure of a structure that can no longer hold. He picked up his phone. He dialed. He turned slightly away from the room. "Brandon," he said. His voice was flat and emptied out. "Drop the filing." He listened for a moment. "Both of them," he said. "The petition and the contest." He paused. "Because we're done with this one." He set the phone on the register. He did not look at her. She untied her apron. She put it on the counter, folded the way she had been putting it on that counter for 3 years. "I quit," she said. She walked out through the front door. Dutch was standing on the sidewalk in the October morning, the sun beginning to burn through the gray, his hands in his jacket pockets. She stood beside him and felt the weight of the vest on her shoulders and the particular lightness that comes after a very heavy thing is set down. A woman from the Fresno charter walked over 50s cropped gray hair, the kind of face that has seen things and processed them and moved forward. "Your dad talked about you," she said. "At the last run he made it too. He said you were going to be fine." She said it directly, not as comfort, but as information, the way you say things you actually believe. Then she walked back to her bike. Cassie stood on the sidewalk. Then she asked Dutch what happens now. "The codicil clears," he said. "Standard probate timeline once the contest is dropped 30 to 45 days. The land is yours with clean title." "And the email," she said. "Our attorney retains it," Dutch said. "Brandon Voss knows we have it. As long as he leaves you alone and everyone in a similar position alone, it stays where it is. The moment he tries another angle on anyone, it goes to the record searchlight and the Attorney General simultaneously." That felt like enough. "What do I do with the land?" she said. Dutch looked at her. "What do you want to do with it?" She thought about the drive home on Stone Ridge every night, the scrub oak, the gravel drive, the rosemary her mother had planted, the creek her father checked every morning. "I want to stay," she said. "Then stay," he said. She stayed. The probate court cleared the codicil 41 days after both filings were withdrawn. She drove to the courthouse on a Tuesday morning in a truck she had bought with 3 months of double shifts at a new job, a breakfast spot in downtown Redding that was busy and well-run and where nobody watched her from behind a register with a flat patient expression. She sat in the clerk's office while a woman with reading glasses looked at the documents and stamped them and handed her the copies and said, "Everything looks correct here," and that was that. 3 years of waiting and 2 months of the thing she had been waiting for resolved at a counter with a stamp and a handshake. She drove home on Stone Ridge Road with the window down and the late November air cold and clean. She stood at the fence behind the trailer and looked at the creek. It was running clear and fast with the first real rains of the season. The water quality was good. She had checked it herself twice with a kit from the county extension office, the same place her father had gotten his kit. She had found this quietly, complexly funny. She had plans for the land, not immediate plans, but real ones, the kind that come from actually knowing what you need rather than what you think you should want. She had been drawing them out on graph paper for weeks, the dimensions changing as she got clearer. A small structure on the north edge of the property, where the ground was level and the morning light came in from the east. A kitchen large enough to actually work in. A window that faced the creek. Storage organized the way her father organized things, each thing in its place, accessible, cared for. She was going to call it Iron Hands. She had not decided this. She had said it out loud to Lena on the phone one evening in November, and Lena had been quiet for a moment and then said, "That's right. That's exactly right." And that had been the decision. Dutch came by on a Saturday in early December with 4 Sacramento members she had met by then, Hayes and Grady and 2 others, and they brought tools and spent the day in the cold putting in the foundation footings for the building she was going to build. They worked with a methodical efficiency that made her think of her father's sorted bolt can. Each step in its right order, nothing wasted, nothing performed. At the end of the day, she made coffee, and they sat on the steps and the overturned feed bucket she used as outdoor furniture, and Hayes looked at the sky going dark over the oaks and said nothing in particular, and Grady looked at the creek the way he always seemed to look at it. She said, "I want to ask you something." Dutch looked at her. "Did he know?" she said. "Did my father know it would be this specific situation? Derek and the land and all of it?" Dutch thought about it for a moment. He didn't see the future, he said. He just knew the shape of things. He knew the land was worth more than anyone was going to tell you. He knew there would eventually be someone who tried to take advantage of the fact that you were alone and didn't have resources. He knew the system that was supposed to protect you was going to work slowly and expensively, the way it always does for people without money. He paused. So he put pieces in place, not to fight the battle for you, just to make sure you had what you needed to fight it yourself. He looked at the creek. He trusted you to do the rest, Dutch said. She thought about walking into that pawn shop not knowing what was going to happen, just following a note written in black marker on the inside of a leather panel. That was a lot to trust, she said. Dutch looked at her steadily. He believed in you more than you believed in yourself, he said. Most good parents do. She drank her coffee in the cold and looked at the footings they had poured that day, pale rectangles of new concrete in the dark ground, and thought about what they were going to become. Hayes spent the next 4 weekends helping her with the interior work. He had a background in Finnish carpentry that he had mentioned only once, and only in the context of offering to help, and he drove 2 hours from Fresno each of those Saturdays without anyone asking him to, and without wanting anything for it. He helped her set the counters and the window casings and the pass-through shelf between the kitchen and the front room, and he worked the way her father worked, carefully and without wasted motion, the measurements checked twice before anything was cut. When the window casing above the sink was finished, Hayes stood back and looked at it for a moment. "That came out right," he said. She agreed. It had. She put the menu together over 2 months, sitting at the kitchen table in the trailer on evenings after her shifts, writing things down and crossing them out and writing them again. Small and deliberate the way she approached things, breakfast through early afternoon. Everything made from scratch, sourced locally wherever she could manage it on her margins. Good coffee, biscuits, the kind of food that does not require you to apologize for it. The biscuit recipe she had found, written on an index card in her father's handwriting in the kitchen drawer between a card for chili and a card for something called Dutch's cornbread, that she suspected had been named for exactly the reason it sounded like. She had framed the index card. She had put it in a small, simple frame and mounted it above the pass-through window where she could see it from the kitchen. On the wall behind the counter, she built a case from salvaged barnwood, simple and solid with a glass front and a backing of pale pine. She hung the vest inside it at eye level, the patches faced out. The death's head looked at the room. The bottom rocker said, "California." The sergeant-at-arms patch sat where it had always sat, above where her father's heart had been. Below the case, she mounted a small brass plate she had ordered from a metal shop in Sacramento. She had spent a long time deciding what to put on it. She had gone through the obvious things, the things you say to honor someone in the ways that are expected, that are proper and correct, and do not quite reach the truth of it. He served, he protected, he gave, all true, none of them right. She kept coming back to the creek, the way he stood at the fence in his work boots with his coffee, just looking at the water, the bolt can, the 11 families who stayed in their homes not knowing his name, the 11 hours round trip with his kidneys failing. All of it the work of a person who paid attention to the world they were moving through and made small, quiet corrections as they went. Ray Anthony Harlow, 1961 to 2021. He paid attention. She opened the doors on the second Saturday of March. A cool, bright morning, the oaks putting out their first pale green, the air carrying the particular freshness of the end of winter. She had done most of the interior work herself over 4 months, and the space was exactly what she had drawn on the graph paper, small and practical and clean, with the morning light coming in from the east, the way she had planned it, and the window above the sink looking down toward the creek. Dutch was first through the door with 4 Sacramento members behind him, and they sat at the counter and ordered coffee and biscuits and were easy and polite with the 2 other customers who were already there, a retired schoolteacher and her daughter, who had seen the handwritten sign Cassie had put in the laundromat window 3 weeks before and decided to come. At 8:15, more bikes pulled into the lot. She had not asked Dutch to spread the word. She had not asked anyone to come. But they came. By 9 o'clock, there were 61 riders from Sacramento and Vallejo and Fresno in and around the building, filling the counter stools and the 4 tables she had set outside on the gravel, sitting on the low stone wall along the property edge, standing in the lot with their coffee in the cold morning air. The noise of it, the voices and the machines ticking as they cooled, and the smell of coffee and biscuits and the small wood stove she had put in the corner filled the space with a warmth she had not anticipated and had not planned for and did not know quite how to name. She worked the counter herself. She was not ready to hire anyone yet. She moved from the kitchen to the counter to the outside tables and back the rhythm familiar from 3 years of the Blue Sparrow, except that this time the space was hers, and the people in it had chosen to be there, and the coffee was better. Hayes sat at the end of the counter with his hands around his mug and looked at the window casing above the sink. That came out right. He said again the same words as before. She agreed with him the same way she had the first time. Dutch was the last to leave. The lot had cleared by 11 riders heading back south and west in 1s and 2s engines fading down Market Street, the sound moving away until it was gone. He sat at the counter with his 3rd coffee while she cleaned and put things away, moving through the closing routine she had worked out over the previous 3 Saturdays of dry runs. He was quiet for a while. Then your father used to talk about this. About what she said. About you having something of your own, Dutch said. He didn't know what form it would take. He just said that if you ever got the chance to build something from the ground up, you would do it right. He said you were thorough. She ran a cloth along the counter. I'm still figuring it out, she said. Dutch nodded. That's the right condition to be in, he said. Figuring it out. Means you're paying attention. She looked up at the case on the wall. The vest. The hollow-eyed death's head looking at the room. She thought about the morning she had walked into the pawn shop, the 2-finger grip of the kid behind the counter, the $25 offer. How close she had come to just saying yes because yes would have resolved it, and she was tired, and the weight of things had felt very heavy that afternoon. She thought about the door opening behind her. The caught breath. She thought about how many things had to be in place for that moment to happen. How many years of deliberate preparation by a person who was not going to be there for the resolution, but who had made sure the resolution was possible anyway. She set the cleaning cloth aside. She looked at the window. Through it, the creek was moving between the bare gray willows at the bottom of the property, clear and fast in the March light, running clean, the way it had been running clean since the chemical facility had lost its operating license and the runoff had stopped. The creek was right. Her father had said that if the creek was right, everything else could be fixed. She was beginning to believe it. A reporter from the Reading Record Searchlight came in that spring after the probate was fully settled and the title was clean and the certificate of occupancy was posted by the door. He sat at the counter and ordered coffee and said that a few people had told him there was a story here about the place and the woman who built it and the way it had come to be. She thought about what it means to document a person's life, to put words around something that had mostly happened quietly in private in the small, careful daily actions of a man who paid attention and did not ask for recognition. She thought about what gets lost when you reduce a thing to a story and what gets lost when you do not. You can write about the place, she said, what we serve, when we're open, what the space is like. He waited. But the rest of it, she said, I'd rather keep here. She nodded toward the case on the wall, where it belongs. The reporter looked at the vest for a long moment. He looked at the brass plate beneath it. He read the words. Then he looked at her. Fair enough, he said. He wrote a short and accurate piece about a small breakfast spot on Stone Ridge Road in Redding, California, run by a young woman named Cassie Harlow, who clearly knew what she was doing. He noted the window that looked toward the creek, and the biscuits which he mentioned were genuinely good, and the particular quality of the space, which he described as having the feeling of somewhere that had been built by someone who intended to be there for a long time. He did not write about the vest or the brass plate or any of the rest of it. It was enough. It was exactly what it needed to be. On a Tuesday in May, the last of the gray Tuesdays before the real California heat came in and stayed, Cassie opened early, 5:30, before the light had come fully into the sky. She started the coffee and got the biscuit dough going and stood at the window above the sink with her hands around a mug, looking at the creek in the first gray light of the morning. It was running clear. She was wearing the vest. She wore it sometimes on the early mornings when she was alone in the building, in the hour before anyone else arrived, not for any reason she could have fully articulated. It was heavy in the way that things are heavy when they carry history, the accumulated weight of roads and seasons and years of being worn by someone moving through the world in a particular way. It smelled like leather and oil and the long distance her father had traveled in it, and when she wore it, she felt the particular weight of being responsible for something that mattered, and also underneath that weight, the particular steadiness of not being alone in that responsibility. She thought about standing at the same window, not her but him in the early morning in his work boots, with his coffee looking at the water, paying attention to the way it moved, the color of it, the small signs that told you whether the world upstream was doing what it was supposed to do. She thought about what she wished she had said to him. Not the formal things, not the things you are supposed to say to people you love, when you know you are running out of time to say them, but the small and specific things. That she had noticed the Bolt can. That she had always felt safe in a way she could not entirely account for, and now understood better. That every time she came back to Redding, no matter how long she had been away, or how complicated the reasons for being away had been, coming back had felt like the right direction. She thought that was its own kind of language. She thought he probably understood it. She turned from the window. The biscuits were ready to go in. The coffee was done. The morning light was coming in from the east through the window she had measured twice before framing the light moving across the counter the way she had imagined it when she was drawing the plans on graph paper at the kitchen table in the trailer. Not quite right in the drawings because you cannot draw light accurately, only guess at it and hope. She had guessed right. She went to work. Outside, the creek ran clear between the willows, and the first birds of the morning were beginning in the scrub oak at the edge of the property, and down on Stone Ridge Road, the sound of an early truck came and went in the direction of town, and the day began, the way days begin in places where the work is real and the ground is yours, and the people who helped you get there are not far away. She worked through the morning the way she always worked, efficiently and without drama, and with the particular attention to each small thing that she had learned from watching someone do it for 21 years. She thought the morning light looked exactly right. She thought the biscuits were good. She thought the creek was running exactly the way it should. She thought her father would have liked this very much. She thought she was going to be fine. She thought she already was.